Today I would like to begin by sharing with you a very beautiful poem by someone by the name of Ella Wheeler Wilcox. And she wrote a very powerful four-liner. She says, "It is easy enough to be pleasant when life flows along like a song." It is easy to be pleasant, isn't it so? When life flows along like a song. But she continues with the next two verses by saying, "But the man worthwhile is the one who will smile when everything goes dead wrong." It is easy to be pleasant, easy enough to be pleasant when life flows along beautifully like a song. But the man worthwhile is the one who will smile when everything goes dead wrong. Today, we talk about you and I being the instrument of thy will, where whenever there is sorrow and sadness in our life, how do we go about bringing joy? And today we will discuss one method. But before we talk about that one method, we will explore the concept of why an individual experiences joy and why we experience sorrow. Do you all remember the quotation from the Torah? That in the beginning God created heaven and earth, and all that God created was? What was it? In between? What was it? Good. And if all that God created was good, then where does sorrow, where does pain, where does disappointment, where does hurt, where does depression, where do all these negative attributes come from? Is it that God made a mistake when He made that proclamation that all that I have created is good? And in elsewhere parts of Scripture it says that all that God has created, man will inherit. What does it mean? Is it that God intended that somewhere along the line there will be sadness? Is there an error in God's creation? Let's look at this subject. That whenever we as an individual, or I as an individual, experiences sorrow or sadness, it means that it is a definite sign that I would have moved away, or I would have lost the experience of keeping God with me. Think of that statement. Whenever I feel sorrow, whenever I feel sadness, it is a sure sign that I am moving away from that something that is called God or Spirit that is within me. Reflect on a time in your life, and for those who are viewing on television, reflect on a time in your life when you felt sorrow. Or if at this moment as you're listening to this discourse, there is hurt and there is pain in your life, ask yourself, examine where is that pain coming from. And in that experience of pain or disappointment or sorrow, can you safely or assure yourself that in that place that is defined as sorrow or that is hurting in your heart, do you know when you hurt, it actually physically pains in your heart? Do you know that when you feel sorrow, people say when you have a broken heart, it is a figure of speech. A broken heart literally feels pain, physical pain within your insides. And ask yourself, in the moment that you're experiencing sadness or sorrow, is there God or goodness or God-like spirit that you experience at the same time? It's not. Because when sadness and sorrow takes its position in our existence, it displaces, it moves away that closeness and that proximity to what is known as spirit or God. But what is sadness? Sadness is an attitude that we walk around with, where we focus on things that are missing in our life or things that we don't have. Sadness is an attitude or an emotion that we feel when we focus on the things that we don't have or things that are missing in our life. Think about it. Do you feel sad when you have things working your way? Do you feel sad when everything you want you get? Is that normal? Is it natural? But when we feel sadness, it is primarily because we develop an attitude or an emotion that is associated with something that we don't have, things that are lacking, or things that we want and we cannot have at this time in our life. That is why, the primary reason we experience sadness. If you can give me another reason, please share it with me. And some may say, Babs, well, I experience sorrow and sadness when a loved one dies. But what do we experience sorrow? What causes or what generates sorrow? Is it the death of the person, or is it the lack of experiencing that person's presence in our life? That is what brings the sorrow. It is not the death. It is our emotion or our attachment to the experience that that person brings in our life. That is why we cry. That is why we experience sorrow and hurt when someone dies. And think of every other experience in your life that brings sorrow. It is because we develop or we associate that emotion with not having that which we desire in our life, or scarcity in our life. Or what is joy? Devi, what is joy? You're smiling. What is joy? Joy is when you have what you want in your life, isn't it? But do you know that Krishna Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita, he speaks about Sthita Prajna. He says we need to be careful, because as a human being we have been taught, we have been conditioned to associate joy and sadness with the experiences in our life. We have been conditioned, we have been trained to respond in a particular way. So when we get the things that we want in our life, we have been taught as a child, when we pass the subjects, and blessings to all the children who have written exams and gotten their results, blessings to all of them. And those who have received the result that they wanted, they would feel joy. But those who did not get their first choice, or didn't get a school of any of their choices, then they would feel sorrow and pain and disappointment. And as a society, as a people, as elders especially, we have trained ourselves and our children to associate when things don't happen the way we want them to, we think that it is natural to feel sadness and sorrow and disappointment. Krishna Bhagavan says, if you want to live life at its fullest, then you need to step out and realize that it should not be a conditioned response. So in the words of St. Francis of Assisi, he says, O Lord, make me an instrument of thy will. Whenever there is sadness in other people's life or in my life, let me bring joy. What is the antidote when a snake bites you? The doctors will recommend the appropriate antidote, right? You can't just take, this morning my daughter was showing me on the paper, she says, Dad, the cure for swine flu is Panadol, because that was the headline on the newspaper on Wednesday gone. But the author was being cynical. It was a complaint that people who were going to the hospitals with signs and symptoms of swine flu, they were not given the proper treatment. They were given Panadol to take for swine flu, H1A, H1N1 virus. And the point is, you must take the relevant medication, antidote, to deal with the chronic or acute issues in your life. And in the same way, when we experience sadness, the only antidote to sadness, it is, what is the antidote to sadness? Money, right? No. What is it? Going to party, right? No. What is it? The antidote to sadness, it is, Keshav says, happiness or joy. And today, we will examine this concept of how do we bring about joy as an antidote to dealing with sorrow and sadness in our life. Albert Einstein, maybe he had it right when he said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. You cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And whenever we are in that state of sadness or depression or melancholy or any negative word that we can describe a feeling that invokes pain, he says, if you want to find a solution for that problem, you could never do it in the same state of mind. He says, you have to solve a problem by changing the mind or being in a different state of mind from that state that created the problem.